Part 1. The Trap of Kind Intentions. For months I fell for the perfect delusion. My name is Arthur Vance. I am 75 years old, and for over 4 decades, I owned a small, dusty clock repair shop just on the outskirts of Seattle. I spent my life fixing delicate gears, restoring grandfather clocks, and ensuring that everything ran precisely on time. My wife, Eleanor, passed away 3 winters ago. After her empty chair became too painful to look at, the house we'd built together felt less like a home and more like a quiet vault. So when my son Julian and his wife Clara knocked on my door with packed bags and a proposition, it felt like a lifeline. "Dad, you shouldn't be here all by yourself," Julian had said, his arm wrapped warmly around my shoulder. "Let us move in. We'll help with the maintenance, keep you company, and we can save up for our own place. It's a win-win." I agreed before he could even finish the sentence. For the first 6 months it was paradise. Clara made dinners, Julian took care of the yard, and we'd sit by the fireplace talking about old times. I thought I was the luckiest old man in Washington. I had no idea that the son sitting across from me at the dinner table was already mentally packing my bags for a destination I never chose. Around the 8th month the atmosphere shifted. It started with subtle remarks. Clara replaced Eleanor's vintage parlor curtains without asking, claiming they trapped too much pollen. Then Julian began asking pointed questions about my pension, my bank accounts, and whether the mortgage on our 4-bedroom craftsman house was fully paid off, which it was, free and clear, since 2005. Then came the gaslighting. One evening I misplaced my car keys, something I've done since my 30s. Julian looked at Clara, sighed heavily and said, "It's happening more often, isn't it?" Soon Julian insisted on driving me to my routine checkups. In the examination room he would ask my doctor highly specific, leading questions about cognitive decline, memory lapses, and early-stage dementia. I sat there, humiliated, feeling perfectly fine but treated like a fading ghost. A week later I found glossy brochures left accidentally on the coffee table. They featured smiling elderly couples on manicured lawns under headings like Silver Oaks Assisted Living, the care they deserve. When I asked Clara about them, she gave me a sweet, patronizing smile. "Oh, Arthur, that's just for the future. Just in case." But the future was arriving much faster than I realized. Part 2. The Eavesdropped Betrayal. It happened on a breezy Thursday afternoon in April. I had headed out to my old workshop in the backyard to look for a specific brass gear tool I hadn't used in years. As I walked back toward the house, I noticed the kitchen door was propped open just a crack. That's when I heard Julian's voice. He was speaking in a hushed, rapid tone, the kind of voice people use when they think they are completely alone. "No, listen to me," Julian was saying into his phone. "The doctor already noted his memory lapses in the file. That's the paper trail we needed. Once we get him transitioned into Silver Oaks, the legal side of this practically handles itself. We aren't dumping him, Clara. We're just admitting him to a facility that can give him full-time attention while we work." I stood frozen on the porch, my hand gripping the cold metal of my brass tool so tightly my knuckles turned white. My heart hammered against my ribs. Julian kept talking. "Patricia already did the market analysis. In this Seattle climate, a classic craftsman house like this will easily go for $920,000, maybe even more if we list it before the autumn rush. That covers his monthly fees at the home for years and leaves us with a massive chunk for our own place." There was a brief pause as Clara must have replied. Then Julian let out a low, casual chuckle, a sound that cut deeper than any knife. "He has to go, Clara. It's just the reality of the situation. It's not personal, it's just what makes sense for our future. He has to go. He has to go." 4 words. I stood there in the shadow of my own home for what felt like an eternity, though it was probably only a minute. I didn't make a sound. I carefully placed the tool back into my pocket, stepped quietly off the porch and walked out to the garden. I sat on our old wooden bench in the spring sun, acting as if the entire foundation of my life hadn't just shattered into pieces. My first impulse was to storm into that kitchen, look my son in the eye, and ask him how he could treat his own father like an expired piece of furniture. But 40 years of running a business teaches you patience. It teaches you to keep your face completely still when someone is lying to you so you can figure out their next move before they even know you're playing. So, at dinner that night, I quietly ate Clara's chicken pot pie. I asked Julian how his sales quarterly targets were going. I didn't mention Silver Oaks. I didn't mention the $920,000. I just watched them. I lay awake all night in the bedroom Eleanor and I had shared for decades. Every polite comment, every brochure, every doctor's appointment, it all clicked together like the internal gears of a clock. By 3 a.m. I had made my decision. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to make a scene. I was going to beat them at their own game. Part 3. The Secret Countermove. The following Monday, I told Julian I was driving my 2012 Subaru Outback to the optometrist for a routine eye exam. I hadn't had a traffic violation in 50 years, but he still watched me pull out of the driveway like an anxious warden. Instead of the eye clinic, I headed straight to downtown Seattle, to an office overlooking Elliott Bay. I sat across the desk from Evelyn Monroe, a sharp, no-nonsense estate attorney who had handled legal matters for my clock shop decades ago. I didn't sugarcoat anything. I laid out the overheard conversation, the brochures, the sudden doctor visits, and Julian's obsession with my bank accounts. Evelyn listened intently, tapping her pen against a yellow notepad. When I finished, she pulled up the King County property records on her monitor. "Arthur," she said leaning back, "let me be crystal clear. Your name and only your name is on the deed to this property. Unless you've signed away your legal rights through a power of attorney, no one can list your home, touch your savings, or admit you to any care facility without your explicit signature." Then she paused, her eyes narrowing. "Has your son asked you to sign any routine documents lately? Something disguised as tax paperwork or insurance renewals?" My stomach plunged. Instantly, I remembered a stack of documents Julian had casually dropped on the kitchen counter 2 weeks prior. He claimed they were just updated municipal tax assessments that needed my signature for the city records. I hadn't signed them yet. I never put pen to paper without my magnifying glasses and a strong cup of black coffee, so I had put them in my desk drawer. At Evelyn's urging, I brought those papers to her office the very next morning. It took her less than 3 minutes to confirm what we both feared. They weren't municipal tax forms. It was a comprehensive, durable power of attorney. If I had signed those pages, Julian would have gained absolute, unchecked control over my bank accounts, my medical decisions, and my home. He had literally tried to trick me into signing away my independence over a casual Tuesday morning coffee. That discovery killed the last remnant of my paternal hesitation. I wasn't dealing with a well-meaning son anymore. I was dealing with a predator in my own house. Evelyn introduced me to Rachel Chin, an elite real estate agent known for handling high-profile, discreet property transactions in the Seattle area. We met at a quiet diner away from my neighborhood. I paid cash for our coffee and gave her one simple instruction: sell my home quickly, sell it quietly, and make sure my family suspects nothing until the ink is dry. Rachel understood the assignment immediately. She explained that the Seattle housing market was starving for classic craftsman homes. We didn't need a public listing or a for sale sign on the lawn. She would market the property exclusively through a private broker network. To cover my tracks, I opened a new secret checking account at a local credit union Julian knew nothing about, and rented a private P.O. box for all my incoming mail. Every Thursday afternoon, while Julian and Clara assumed I was at physical therapy for my arthritis, I was meeting with Rachel to review private offers. To keep my betrayers completely relaxed, I executed a little theatrical performance of my own. That weekend, I allowed Julian and Clara to take me on a VIP tour of Silver Oaks assisted living. I strolled through the sanitized, lemon-scented hallways, smiled at the activity schedules, and even told the admission director that the dining hall looked delightful. On the drive home, Julian called Clara on speakerphone, practically giddy as he reported how receptive and positive I was about the transition. I sat in the back seat, watching the Seattle skyline roll by, almost feeling sorry for his arrogance. Almost. 8 days after Rachel initiated the private listing, we struck gold. We received an all-cash offer from a young, affluent couple, David and Maya Lynn, who were expecting their first child and fell head over heels in love with my backyard garden. Their offer was $920,000, 0 contingencies, and a flexible closing date. I sat in Rachel's office and signed the purchase agreement with a hand steadier than a Swiss movement. As the pen glided across the paper, Julian's cold words echoed in my mind. "He has to go." I smiled grimly at the signed contract. Someone definitely has to go, Julian, I thought. It just isn't going to be me. Part 4. The Flawless Escape. 2 weeks after I signed the contract, Julian came home from his marketing job practically glowing. His company was sending him and Clara to a corporate retreat in Chicago for 8 days, all expenses paid. Clara was already gushing about the hotel spa and reservations at a high-end steakhouse downtown. "The timing is actually perfect, Dad," Julian told me over dinner, completely oblivious to the gravity of his words. "While we're away, you can really think about Silver Oaks. Maybe we can even place a deposit before we get back, get the ball rolling." "I'll definitely give it some serious thought," I replied in the same calm, agreeable voice I'd been using for weeks. Inside, my mind was racing with precise calculations. The Lynns were eager and fully pre-approved. Rachel and Evelyn had confirmed that we could fast-track the closing to happen in just 4 days, right in the middle of Julian's trip. On a rainy Sunday morning, Julian and Clara loaded their suitcases into their car. Clara reminded me 3 times to water her precious orchids. I stood on the front porch, waving warmly as Julian's sedan pulled out of the driveway, the very same driveway where I taught him to ride his first bicycle 40 years ago. The exact second his car rounded the corner and vanished, I pulled out my phone and called Rachel Chin. "Let's move up the closing," I said. "Let's do it this week. I want the keys turned over before they even board their flight back." The closing took place on Wednesday morning at a quiet title company on Madison Street. David and Maya Lynn sat across the table, Maya's hand resting gently on her pregnant belly. They were practically beaming with excitement about raising their child in the house. As I signed page after page, I felt an incredible weight lifting from my chest. When the last document was stamped, Rachel handed me a certified check for $920,000 minus fees. I had already secured my new home, a bright, modern independent living condo at Cascade Ridge in Bellevue, featuring stunning mountain views and a fully equipped woodworking shop in the basement. No one chose it for me from a glossy brochure. I chose it myself, walked through it myself, and paid for it myself. On Wednesday afternoon and all of Thursday, a team of professional movers I'd hired weeks in advance quietly packed up my life. I took Eleanor's heirloom china, my grandfather's antique tools, our family photo albums, and everything that held real sentimental value. The rest of the furniture I sold to the Lynns for a very fair price. By Thursday evening, the house belonged entirely to David and Maya. The locks were changed by a locksmith, and I was sitting on my new balcony in Bellevue, watching the sunset over the Cascade Mountains with a fresh cup of coffee. I felt a profound sense of peace I hadn't known in years. Before leaving my old home for the final time, I sat at the kitchen table where Eleanor and I had eaten breakfast for nearly 40 years. I wrote one last letter. It wasn't written out of anger, but out of a quiet, cold necessity for truth. I sealed it in an envelope with Julian's name on it and taped it firmly to the front door, right at eye level, exactly where I knew his key would fail to turn. I wrote, "Julian, I know everything." I was standing in the garage with my brass tool in hand when you told Clara on the phone that he has to go, and spoke about the $920,000 as if it were already yours. I also found the power of attorney you tried to slip past me under the guise of tax documents. The house has been sold, legally and permanently, to a wonderful young family who actually deserves to build a future here. I'm not angry, but I am disappointed in a way that goes deeper than anger can reach. I hope one day you understand what it feels like to be treated as an inconvenience by the person you loved most. Do not try to call my old number, it has been deactivated. I will only answer if you reach out to apologize and truly mean it. Love, Dad. I locked the door, stepped into my Subaru, and drove away without looking back. According to my neighbor, Marcus, who watched the climax unfold from his porch, Julian and Clara pulled into the driveway late Sunday evening, tan and relaxed. Julian walked up to the front door, slid his key into the deadbolt, and twisted. The key wouldn't budge. He jiggled it, cursed, and tried again, calling out to Clara that the lock must be broken. That's when Maya Lynn opened the door from the inside, looking confused and holding a newborn blanket. Marcus said Julian stood frozen on the steps, his jaw dropped, before his eyes finally locked onto the white envelope taped to the doorframe. Clara read the letter first under the dim porch light. Halfway through, her hands began to violently shake. Julian snatched the paper from her to read the rest. And then the screaming started. Clara collapsed onto the grass in tears. Julian stood there, clutching the paper, staring at a house that no longer belonged to him, on a street where he thought he'd soon inherit a fortune. My new phone rang exactly 4 minutes later. I didn't answer. Julian called 31 times over the next 3 days. I let every single call go to voicemail. I wanted him to sit in the exact same silence and uncertainty he had planned to hand to me. On the 4th day, sitting on my balcony as the mountains glowed orange in the twilight, I finally picked up. Dad, please? Julian's voice cracked instantly. We didn't mean it like that. It was just talk. We can fix this. Just tell us where you are. I let him scramble for excuses, listening to his frantic apologies about financial stress and just wanting what was best for my health. When he finally ran out of breath, I spoke softly. I heard every word of that call, Julian. I saw the papers you tried to trick me into signing. I still love you because you are my son, but love does not mean I owe you the home I worked 40 years to pay off. I am happy now in a place of my own choosing, surrounded by people who respect me. Before hanging up, I added, the door to my life isn't closed forever, Julian. But it will only open when you are ready to see me as your father again, and not as a payout standing in the way of your plans. I ended the call, set the phone on the table and took a sip of my coffee. For the first time in a very long time, the clock was ticking and I was entirely at peace.